Good morning, everybody. I'm Dale Peabody. I think Bill mentioned me once or twice in his opening remarks. I'm with the Maine Department of Transportation. I'm the Director of Research and Innovation there. And I'm the chair of the TIDC Advisory Board. One thing, David, before we get into the questions, you and I do have something in common. I enjoyed your bio at the beginning, your brief introduction, and I too served on a railroad gang when I was in high school. Probably not to the extent that you did, but I remember digging up clay underneath an old railroad track at a local business, and we're putting ballast in by wheelbarrow and shovels. So that's my real experience anyway, and I thought I'd share it with you. Again, thank you very much. Folks on the line, folks on the call, if you would put any questions in the Q&A. And I gotta open that up. I'm not seeing anything right now. So please ask your questions of David. We have until about, we have about 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes for Q&A. But I would like to start, you touched on it, David, future of the rail. And I know your closing remarks, things look pretty bright. I mean, what else can you add to your comments as far as what the future, maybe, I know passenger rail is kind of big as far as freight, and you mentioned a lot of the like the paper mills, especially in Maine, closing, but what's the freight look like as far as things that the rail will be hauling in New England?
So thanks, Dale. Nice to be with you this morning. Well, I think the important thing is we were always looking for what the next product to move, and we pivoted from the paper, which we still move a lot of, to propane and to water and to waste. I think the big thing over the next 5 years is going to be transportation of municipal solid waste out of New England to other places. Massachusetts in particular, they're closing all the landfills and they don't have enough incineration capacity. So over the last 4 years, we started to move MSW to South Carolina, Alabama, and Ypsilanti, Michigan. So that was a big revenue booster for us. And I think down the road, that could be almost a unit train a day out of the state of Massachusetts and New Hampshire out west. The connection to New Brunswick is going to be really solidified with the rebuilding of our line from Waterville to Mattawamkeag through CSX and a Chrissy grant, which we really thank. And it goes back to certainly Dave Bernhard and working with Nate Moulton. And I know Nate and I kind of started around the same time on the NEPR project. And the thought today, back when we were back in like 2000, and here we are today with big railroads with big money investing back in the state to improve transit times, increase speeds, and to have more options for the customers up there is going to be great. So as this money is spent, as we have options to move products more quickly, I think more things will come online here in Maine and New England, and particularly out in Atlantic Canada. And the single line service I talked about, it's a lot better when the customer can go to one company, CSX, instead of my railroad. They would talk to us and we would talk to them and come up with a rate. And then we'd go back to the customer. It just takes time. In the railroad business, sometimes we're a little slow in technology and a little hidebound in how we operate. And today, our customer wants instantaneous answers on things. They want to know where their car is. If you go and call Domino's, you know where your pizza is, but you don't know where your railroad car is. And that's been very frustrating for us in the business as we try to put these systems in place. And it's certainly frustrating for the customers when they call, hey, where's my car? And it's like, well, I'm pretty sure it's in Waterville. And that's where it last showed that it's in Waterville. I'm like, well, when's it going to get up to the Sappi Mill? And not having those instant answers. These are things that the bigger, newer railroads are going to be able to spend money on. It's not that we weren't spending money on it, but a smaller railroad like us and our financial ability, the railroad is in really good shape when it merged with CSX. But to take a big Fortune 250 company and the deep pockets that they have is just going to be very, very helpful to the folks in the area that we operate in.
Thank you, David. I am now seeing some questions coming in. And as a reminder to folks, the attendees, if you do click on the Q&A button down below in the virtual meeting, you should be able to open that up and ask your questions. And but I do have something that came up in the chat, and it's talking about the smaller rail branches and how your comments appear to be in favor of conversions. And it looks like recreation trail use. So how about your opinions and thoughts on rails to trails?
Well, I mean, if it can be used as a railroad and the railroad can make money on it, and when we go back to those earlier slides when Conrail split out a lot of tracks, and the Bain Central and the B&M did the same thing. We weren't able to make money on it, so we would sit down, and usually the state in New England, all the states have a right of first refusal. If we decide we're not going to operate on the line, we have to go to the Surface Transportation Board and go to abandon it. It's a fairly lengthy process where the federal government wants to be sure that it can't be used for rail and it isn't making any money. And then options go on the table where, okay, we sell it to the state. And in Maine, I think, Nate and the DOT have a great relationship with all the railroads. And sometimes they rail bank it, or sometimes they put it in a trail category. Now, a perfect example would be what we did on the Madison branch. We didn't want to abandon the Madison branch, but there was one customer. It was 27 miles long, and they went out of business. They no longer were making paper. So we had a 27-mile long branch line with no customer, and we sat down and negotiated a deal to sell it to the state. We abandoned it at the federal government, and the snowmobile folks had already been using that line northeast of the mill up towards North Anson anyway. So it was a picture perfect opportunity to take that line, help defray some of the costs that the state had to pay us by taking the rail up and then making it into a snowmobile trail. So great recreation option for the folks up in Maine, because quite frankly, there's not going to be another paper mill put there. So that's a good use, I think, of that trail for recreational purposes. On the other pieces, you might want to save it and keep it in rail, because rail may come back. And I think the state of Maine's done that kind of on the Madison, not the Madison, but on the Mountain Division, where part of it can still be used. And I certainly know that the folks at Poland Spring were looking at, possible bottling opportunities towards Freiburg. And we were talking with them about maybe water on rail. So you have to have options. But if you don't see any rail use going down the road, that recreational option, I think, is an excellent opportunity as the people get out and do more walking or biking or taking their dogs on the trail. It's a really good use, because you're never going to put that line back together in a linear piece like that.
Yeah. All right. So Rachel Burkhardt, let me see, CSX purchase of PAR, including rights into the port at St. John, New Brunswick. So when CP bought, all the acronyms here, CMQR, they soon started intermodal traffic to and from the port. So the question is, do you know if CSX will implement intermodal traffic to and from the port?
I do not have an answer to that, but certainly the connection with St. John, New Brunswick is an important piece of why CSX would want to buy us. And competition between 3 Class 1 railroads is going to be great for the folks up in St. John, New Brunswick. I mean, right now, CP is running 8,000 foot intermodal, double stack intermodal trains into the port of St. John. I mean, we've been trying to do intermodal in St. John. We had the Atlantic Clipper we had back in the early 90s, where we came down from Halifax, single stacked to Boston. So CP and CSX coming into New England is going to mean more competition, and that's good for the customers in New England. And you'd have these different seminars where everyone would talk about Maine is a cul-de-sac. It's the end of the line. It's the far end of the United States, and it's like we don't have a lot of transportation options. Now there are going to be more transportation options. There's going to be intermodal transportation options. We see that with CP, and we'll see what CSX brings out. But they are an innovative marketing group, and they want to put more business on the rail. It's more efficient. It's great from the environment. And I think they'll look that way, but I have no specific knowledge on any specific programs as far as that goes.
Great, thank you. Question from Jack Madden, who's fellow Northeast University graduate. So does the PIR CSXT trackage rights extend from Mattawamkeag, that's all in Maine, all the way to the port at St. John, New Brunswick? And he said,
I am
yeah.
Not sure of the particulars on that, but we always had a haulage agreement with folks at Irving. They have their railroad very well run. We had a great relationship with the folks at Irving. Matter of fact, we did a joint venture to buy the bankrupt CMQ. Irving and ourselves bid, I don't know, $8 million, and the folks at Fortress bid 18, and then they sold that to CP. Next to Hunter Harrison being a financial genius on rails, the folks at Fortress made a tremendous amount of money when they sold it to CP. So it's more haulage than I think trackage rights. And somebody would have to go into the Surface Transportation Board filing to see if they can get right into St. John. But it's in everybody's interest to have more options to go up there. One option's good, two options better, and really, quite frankly, up in St. John, you'll have three options. You'll have CN, CP, and CSX.
Thank you, David. Here's an interesting question. Any thought of using artificial intelligence to run railroad in the future?
Well, that is a very interesting question. And one of the frustrating things, and again, I teach a supply chain class at Northeastern, and the technology on the rail side. I mean, we have a lot of really fantastic technology. I mean, the railroads were kind of one of the innovators on the computer. I mean, many of us can remember, for over 55 or 60, the IBM cards we used to type in when we did computer programming. That was it was a railroad card. That's what it started, the IBM and the Pennsylvania Railroad. We were real leaders in technology. We've kind of fallen behind in various areas, I think, in the industry, but on certain areas, like when it comes to safety, being able to measure the track, and being able to measure if the cars running along the track are not running correctly. We've done a great job on that. But as far as information to get to our customer, not so good. On the AI side, there are companies out there. As a matter of fact, one of the people that worked for me at Pan Am, Michael Tetler, he's a Northeastern master's graduate as well, works for a company called AI Cedar, which they are now trying to use artificial intelligence to make yard moves and to essentially look ahead to see how we should switch cars, be more efficient, not waste as much time in the yard. If you go to our yard at Rigby, it's the largest yard in Maine. You know, it has 1,200 cars in there. Moving one car to one track and two cars to the other track takes time. And if we have a computer think ahead with artificial intelligence, it's going to save a lot of time. So there is work being done on that, but it's certainly in its infancy.
Great, thank you. Jim Bryce asks, will the CSX increase to 40-mile-per-hour speeds translate directly into new or improved business opportunities?
That's their goal, and that's what they said to the STB. When I ran the railroad, it was branch lines at 10 miles an hour work for me, and main line at 25. Our main line from Waterville to Albany, New York was 25, 40 miles an hour. East of Waterville, we were up to Mattawamkeag at 60 miles, and we had a Chrissy grant to increase that to 25. CSX has already put rail up there. They want to go 40. They go much faster. As Nate always says, it's all about rocks, steel, and wood. And they're going to put a lot of rock, steel, and wood in so they can go faster. Okay,
and Jack Madden, another question here. Does CPR have second generation double stack clearance? That's 20 foot, 6 inch from Port of St. John west into Canada.
Yes, I think they do. They are double stack. I don't think our obviously our problem in New England, where we are, where there's a lot more people, is a lot of overhead bridges. And the clearance issues were such that we were going to have to spend a lot of money to double stack clear. And then we, of course, on Pan Am Southern have the Hoosick Tunnel, longest tunnel east of the Mississippi River, just under 5 miles in length, where we can't do second generation double stack. One of the great benefits of this deal was Norfolk Southern negotiated with CSX to run a fully done double stack intermodal train along the Boston and Albany line, the CSX main line. So instead of them having to do what we put together with NS is a fillet to pay double stack to Mechanicville, then they take the top off. The top boxes would go to Albany, and then the bottom boxes would go to Air. And then it was a fillet to pay. It was expensive, but that's what we needed to do because we weren't going to be able to clear the Hoosick Tunnel and the 17 other bridges along the way. So that's another great benefit when you think about it. A train can leave Chicago 8,000 or 9, I think they can do 9,500 feet of double stack. So you're doing the same amount of business on half the numbers of trains, which means less pollution. It means less interference out on the main line. So these are some of the side benefits that this project will show to the folks in New England.
Oh, great. I do have one question, which probably will prove my ignorance of the rail industry, but there's a lot of talk about climate and moving to alternative fuels for different vehicles. I don't know if what's a viable option for locomotives, or is there anything?
So a real great test has been done on LNG down on the Florida East Coast. The folks at Fortress rebuilt their entire locomotive fleet to go with LNG. So that's been worked. There's been some hiccups in it, but it's been working. I think CP is doing some stuff with hydrogen, and all the big class ones are now working on battery powers with the guys at Wabtec. It used to be GE Transportation on battery powered locomotives. I think we're a little ways off, but that's certainly, the environmental movement is demanding that. Certainly when you look at a number of gallons of diesel that is consumed by the railroad industry, I think if you look at, I think Union Pacific is probably the largest purchaser of diesel next to the United States government. So if you could transform to a different fuel and still move the freight, I mean, we're already really energy efficient as it is, and with the newer generation Tier 4 locomotives, not polluting as much, but they're looking at other forms of fuel to move the freight.
Great. Last call for questions, folks. We do have a few more minutes left. Is that Poland Spring water you're drinking, David?
No, you know what? This isn't. Unfortunately, the other one the other day for the taped one was, but it took me a minute. It took me a minute to get online today, so I grabbed whatever happened to be in the refrigerator here at the office. We need to switch though to from Wellesley Farms back to Poland Spring.
There you go. There you go. Well, we have a couple minutes, David. If there's anything else that you want to add or tell the attendees or
no. I appreciate the chance to get on here. Hopefully you've been enlightened a little bit about what we had happening over the last 45 years and a really exciting time. This is an engineering conference. There's going to be a lot of engineering opportunities, certainly in New England on the rail side. It's a great business. Oh, somebody just brought me. I want to put that in at the show. We do have Poland Spring building. Now that I don't have to work directly with the folks at it's Blue Trident now, but Poland Spring, they would not be happy if I wasn't drinking their product. But no, really, I think a great time. Certainly great engineers that come out of UMaine Orono. We hired them. We found that it was better in our business when we hired folks from the state of Maine, because I'm not from Maine, I'm from away. I knew that. And it's better when you know how you can hire the right people that, know the system and are hard workers. I mean, for years, our best employees through the whole system is the folks that we work with in Maine. They could make things work that I'd be like, how'd they make that happen? It's like, because they're very smart and they've done a lot of training in the woods. They know hydraulics, they know diesel, they know electrical. And we had some really great people. And I can't say, the folks I worked with, people that are on, some of them are on these panels. I'll miss that going forward, but I really appreciate the opportunity to chit chat about what's happened in the last 40 years. Hope you found it interesting and enlightening.
Yeah, I certainly did. I want to thank you again for joining us. We do have another question that just came in from Ramesh at UConn. What do you think near and long-term research needs or topics are for railroad infrastructure improvement that could be conducted at the universities? Great question, Ramesh. Thank you.
I think the biggest thing is the continued use of technology. And I know the Federal Railroad Administration has been working on that for track inspection. And, our track is inspected once a week on certain lines, twice a week on passenger lines. And it's usually done by very qualified inspectors with their eyes. We now know we have a lot more high technology items that we can run on our pickup trucks or on our high rail cars, and using that and making that technology better, I think is important. And I know people in New England have certainly been working on that. We work with a company and I think it's in Vermont, Rail Pod. So there's that, continued improvement on the positive train control signaling piece. It's very complicated, the interconnectability between all the railroads. So there's a lot of electrical signal work on that area. Certainly continued work on our bridges. I certainly learned in my business, and I'm a business guy, not an engineer, but I always think back, Dale, if you started in engineering, you're kind of that's where you think. And if your track isn't in good shape, the rest of it doesn't really matter. Continuing, working on that. But bridges were always expensive. If our engineers would come and say, oh, we got to do this work on this bridge, and to bring it up to 286 is going to be 2 million. And then all of a sudden they open it up, and all of a sudden they come back in and say, oh, we were wrong. It's 4 million. And it's like, well, we don't have 4 million. We have 2, maybe 3. So continued work on that, I think is going to be important for the folks in New England. And then continued working on clearances, which can be certainly a problem when you try to raise the height of bridges when it's going through a neighborhood, and all of a sudden you have to start talking about taking people's homes. I've done that in New Hampshire, and it doesn't usually go well. It's contentious. DOT's stuck in the middle. We're trying to make people happy. Can we go down? Should we go up? I mean, there's no easy way to solve these issues and problems, but those are some of the things that are going to be issues as we go forward. And I think there'll be continued push for passenger. I mean, I think NEPRA is looking at different options to expand passenger service. Certainly the Biden administration is looking at, giving Amtrak $65 billion over what they are already going to do a lot of the things that need to be fixed up on the Northeast Corridor. So there's going to be a lot of different options and opportunities for building there, maybe not as much research. So
great. Well, thank you once again. And I don't see any more questions. So I think what we'll do is we'll wrap up this session. David, well, we really appreciate you joining us. The history of the rail was certainly very interesting to me. It reminded me of the board game Monopoly and how I always like to buy the railroads on that.
Yeah,
so
right.
Well, thank you again very much.